All right, there we go. Started recording. We're in the third chapter of Daniel. We're going to finish that up tonight. And first of all, does anybody have any questions or comments on where we've been so far in Daniel? Anything that's been on your mind that's hit you during this week that you've read or seen or the Spirit has brought to your attention before we get started? Because I'm going to bring up one more thing. Anything else? All right, I'm gonna bring up one more thing about the Daniel's dream image, and then we're gonna let it rest unless anybody else has anything to comment on it. We're gonna let
No,
it rest. Yes, yes,
I,
Bonnie.
I have a dumb question.
No such thing.
uh, when they put the three of them in the fire,
Yes.
my question was, because they didn't worship the idol, but Daniel didn't either. So why wasn't he in there?
But if you read when we read the chapter, Daniel is not mentioned at all.
I
So
know.
the common interpretation of this, you remember Daniel is way on up in the government now. Daniel is
Yeah.
way on up there, and the common idea was that Daniel is off in another part of the kingdom dealing with some other issue and is not present when Nebuchadnezzar made this proclamation.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's the common explanation, and it's perfectly reasonable. The vice president's always jetting around the world trying to deal with issues while the president's here. So, Daniel is way up there. Kind of like the vice president. So most people say that the reason he wasn't uh, uh, pointed out here was that he was not in Babylon, in the capital when Nebuchadnezzar made this proclamation, or he would have been in the same he would have been in the same soup because he would
Yeah,
not
because
have
they
been
were
happy.
all always jealous of him, and
Yeah, that's exactly that's exactly what it is, Bonnie. It's pure jealousy. Is that all of a sudden here these three Hebrews that were uh, you can't really say slaves because they weren't. I mean, these guys are in school. They occupy high level in the government now, so they're not really slaves, but they are Hebrews that were taken, so they're not, socially acceptable. So yeah, you're exactly right. We have some severe jealousy from the Chaldeans here. So
thank you.
any other questions? I hope that got it because that's generally what you'll see.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep. So I'm going to say one last thing about the dream statue, and then we're going to go on. We're going to go on because I can't let it rest. The iron symbolizes Rome, the Roman Empire, just like the Greek Empire, the Media Persian Empire, and the Babylonian Empire. The metals symbolize the empire, and they go from a division. Gold goes to silver, silver goes to bronze, and bronze goes to iron. They go in definite divisions when that empire fell to the next empire. But iron is different. There is no division. It's just all of a sudden when we get to the feet, we see a mixture of clay and iron, making the feet unstable. So Rome never left the scene, as near as I'm reading. Rome never left the scene. Iron is still there. It's just that in this period where we get to the feet, the very end of the reign of the Gentiles, there is an illicit mixture, an illicit, unstable mixture of clay and iron. So Rome, iron, the Roman Empire. And I wish Jeff were here because I think he'd have some things to say about this. And he'll watch the recording, so he'll come back next week. The Roman Empire. Think back in your history books. What did the Roman Empire become after Jesus has risen and gone ahead, and we go ahead in history and we start getting, into the modern time? What did the Roman Empire become? All you history buffs out there, you remember? It became the Holy Roman Empire under Constantine. And that right there, oh, when I thought about oh, I didn't want to think about that. But the Roman Empire under Constantine became the Holy Roman Empire when Constantine supposedly converted to Christianity. There's a lot of controversy about that. So now we've got Rome becoming the Holy Roman Empire. Now most of our comparisons here that we read last week about what the different types of eschatology, the different viewpoints of the end times, what they thought this mixture of iron and clay were. And probably the most popular one at this point is that this represents the nations of Europe, because Rome was Europe. The Roman Empire was Europe. So France and Germany and Austria-Hungary and Spain, all of these European nations were part of the Roman Empire. So the most popular one is that this mixture of iron and clay is when Rome started to lose its real power, and these nations divided off, and they became France and Germany and Austria-Hungary and Prussia and all that. And that's what the toes represent, is these European nations. Now that's the most popular interpretation at this point in time. But the Roman Empire became the Holy Roman Empire. I can't get by that. What if this mixture were the Roman Empire becoming the Holy Roman Empire? We read about the God's chosen last week in the Old Testament being described as clay many times. We have several references to it. And I'm collecting these references in my notebook here, and at some point I think I might put these up on YouTube or somewhere where people can get to them. But these are just notes that I've collected and written through here. But we have several references that we read last week about the chosen, the people of Israel, being described as clay, potter's clay, and God being described as the potter. So I'm still wrestling with this, because I have heard this interpretation maybe twice, maybe twice, that this unstable mix here is actually the Holy Roman Empire, basically the Catholic Church. And it makes sense because the Catholic Church divided into two feet, the Roman Church and the Eastern Church. The, the church, the Holy Roman Empire, the Roman Church divided very quickly after it was formed into two, the Roman Church and the Eastern Church. And then later on, 10 toes, just like the nations of Europe, they divided into countless denominations. Countless denominations. And I'm 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 still not going to put this out of my head. I'm still packing this away because I'm going into this because I'm just like you. I was taught uh, I was a preterist, partial preterist. So
What's that?
my beliefs is the dispensational, where we have a rapture and the church goes away, and then the tribulation comes, and then Christ comes back. So that's basically the where I came up through the church in. But I'm putting this aside because this is a journey for me too. This is a journey for me too. I'm going into this and saying, you know what? All of that teaching, I'm just going to put it aside, and I'm going to go through this because yeah, I do look occasionally at some commentary, but most of the time, I am looking. I'm looking at this. I'm looking at the Bible, and that's what I'm basing this stuff on. I'm trying to stay very close to the Bible and not use outside commentary unless I absolutely have to, and I know that they are a proper commentary. They believe that Daniel was written in the 600s BC. They believe in prophecy. They believe in miracles. They believe in the heavenly council, angels, demons. That's the only commentary I use, unless I'm going to use one of the liberal commentaries to show you how far off they are. So I can't I can't get away from that. Roman Church, Eastern and Western Roman Church, and then the toes being the multiple divisions that we had at the Reformation, where the Protestant denominations came in. That is an unstable mix. You can't tell me it's not. How many denominations do we have? That's not stable. So think about that this coming week. And Jeff, when you read this, when you hear this, you think about that too. I'll come and talk to you on Sunday. So think about that this week. Let's not let's not ignore that because that's just I just can't get that out of my mind. So, chapter 3. Let's switch gears. Unless there are any questions,
I like the breakdown.
I just it works just like the nations of Europe work. The nations of Europe work for that. Rome fell into disarray. there was an Eastern Rome and a Western Roman Empire, and those pieces eventually became the nations of Europe. And Europe, there's a lot of attention on Europe in the end times because of the Roman connection. So we can't discount that. We can't discount it. And it fits well. But then again, this Roman church and Eastern church, that fits also. And I can't put that down. So let's carry that with us. Let's carry that burden with us. All right, back to the fiery furnace. We all remember what happened last week. Nebuchadnezzar, we finished up Daniel's interpretation, and Daniel and his three comrades, their interpretation of the dream and their elevation into the Babylonian hierarchy. They went way up in the government. That story is done. We start with chapter 3. Now we have a new piece in the history of Babylon. And this one where Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, and it's called an image of gold. First verse: Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold whose height was 60 cubits and whose breadth was 6 cubits. Nothing else is said about it. An image of gold. We talked about that last week. Probably not one of the gods, or they would have said it. They would have said, because the Babylonians didn't have one god, they didn't have two gods. They had a whole bunch of them. And if it were one of their gods, Daniel would have pointed that out, but he didn't. He said an image of gold. And that term is very, very specific. An image of gold. It's an image. A lot of people think it was Nebuchadnezzar. It could have been, but I think Daniel might have said Nebuchadnezzar made an image of himself in gold. So I don't know what it was. A lot of people say it's an image of the dream statue that he saw. That one kind of makes sense to me. I kind of like that one. So I'm thinking that this is an image of the dream statue that he had, just simply because of the impact that it had on him. Because remember, when Daniel finished the interpretation, it says back in chapter 2, King Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face and paid homage to Daniel. It struck him to the core. So my leaning to this is towards the fact that this was an image of what Nebuchadnezzar perceived as this statue. But it represents the government of Nebuchadnezzar, the kingdom that Nebuchadnezzar rules. And I think that's pretty obvious from what we have in the Bible account, that this was an image representing the power and the glory of Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom. So Nebuchadnezzar makes a proclamation that everybody is going to bow down and pay homage to, worship this image that he constructed. And that's what it says. So let me find it. You are commanded, O peoples and nations, verse 4 in chapter 3. You are commanded, O peoples and nations and languages, that when you hear the sound of the horn, the pipe, the lyre, the trigon, the bagpipe, the harp, and every kind of instruments, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar has set up. That's the proclamation. We came upon something that, not many people see here when we read about the Chaldeans, because the Chaldeans noticed, and they probably knew what was going to happen when they said that, because of the reverence that the Jews had for the one God. The Chaldeans were probably on the watch out for this. And so we get down to verse 12, where the Chaldeans come. Well, I'm going to read that whole paragraph, starting at verse 8. Therefore, at the time, certain Chaldeans came forward and maliciously accused the Jews. They declared to King Nebuchadnezzar, and it says maliciously, and you think, well, wait a minute, there's the Jews didn't bow down. How can you call that malicious? The Chaldeans just told Nebuchadnezzar what was happening. Ha ha, not exactly. So the words in the Bible are very important, and you read that maliciously, and you think, well, it wasn't really malicious. They just told them that they weren't bowing down. Yeah, not exactly. So we continue on. They declared to King Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that every man who hears the sound of the horn, the pipe, the lyre, the trigon, the harp, the bagpipe, and every kind of instrument shall fall down and worship the golden image. Okay, good so far. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into a burning furnace. There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, pay no attention to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. There's the malice. There is the malice. The king's proclamation said nothing about serving the gods. Everybody in Babylon had their own personal god and then the national gods. The Nebuchadnezzar couldn't care less about your personal gods if you were worshiping his image of the kingdom of Babylon. That's all he cared about because that's all his proclamation said. He didn't care about personal gods. His God, his national God, was the God. His kingdom was the image. That's all he cared about. But these Chaldeans, they're stirring up trouble. Then, verse 13, then Nebuchadnezzar in a furious rage commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought. And they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said to them, Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve any gods, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that you have set up? The king was deceived. The king got deceived by his elite. Because now the king thinks that that's his proclamation. Do you see how deceptive the enemy is? How just utterly clever he is. He turned that simple declaration that Nebuchadnezzar made and turned it around now to not only it's about the kingdom, but it's about his God. And the king believed it. The king believed it. Is it true? If you are ready, when you hear the sound of the horn, the pipe, the lyre, the trigon, the harp, the bagpipe, and every kind of instrument, to fall down and worship the image I have made, well and good. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar. Now notice how they address the king. The the Chaldeans address the king as, O king, live forever. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego address him as Nebuchadnezzar, the king. We have no need to answer you in this matter. If this be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your God or worship the golden image that you have set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with fury, and this time it says up there in verse 13, Nebuchadnezzar in a furious rage commanded Shadrach, Meshach. He's different this time. Then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with fury, and the expression of his face was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Something happened right there. Something happened. Don't know. I don't know, but something happened. Now he was furious, but also his expression, his face changed. He's losing control. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times more than usual, and he ordered some of the mighty men of his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and cast them into the burning fiery furnace. That term, mighty men, that's the same term you hear when they address David's mighty men. This is a group of well-respected, battle-hardened veterans in an army. That's what these mighty men are here. So this is Green Berets. This is Special Forces. Uh, these are pretty high up army men here. Then these men were bound in their cloaks, their tunics, their hats, and other garments, and they were thrown into the fiery furnace. Because the king's order was urgent and the furnace overheated, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell bound into the burning fiery furnace. I don't know why they're mentioned. They were bound in their cloaks, their tunics, their hats, and other garments. Otherwise, maybe this was done in haste. There was no preparation. The king said it. They bound them up, whatever they were dressed in, their finest for this celebration here. But they were bound up in whatever they had on and thrown in. I don't know why that's there. It sticks out to me, but I can't think of a reason other than it was done in haste. If somebody else can see something in that, speak out. They were thrown into the burning fiery furnace. Then now this is a smelting furnace, so it's a large um, clay uh, furnace, probably shaped like the top of an egg, kind of a dome affair. There's a hole in the top where they put the ore and the whatever they're smelting, the iron ore, the copper, the zinc. They put the metals in there. There's a hole, not a doorway because it's open, but there's a hole in the bottom at the ground level where they stoke the fire. They put the coke or the coal or the wood in there, and they also use that hole to pull out the refined metal. So that's what you're looking at, a large clay structure with probably a scaffolding coming up to load it, to load the furnace. So they took the men along the scaffolding. They got kind of close because it's made really hot, and they got too close, and everybody should have been killed on the scaffolding, but Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had God's favor. So the mighty men were killed, but Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego fell into the furnace. And now Nebuchadnezzar is looking in the furnace where they take the ore out, and he says, "Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and rose up in haste. He declared to his counselors, 'Did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire?' They answered and said to the king, 'True, O king.' He answered and said, 'But I see 4 men, unbound, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt, and the appearance of the fourth is like a son of the gods.'" So there's 4 men now there now, and they expected to see dead men, or at least men writhing in agony in there, and there's 4 men walking around in the bottom of the furnace. And the fourth one is different. He recognized the other 3 as just plain men, but this fourth one looks to him, and remember, this is Aramaic. It's written in the language of the Babylonians. It looks to him like some kind of angelic being that the Babylonians had, messengers from their gods, some kind of angel. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the door of the burning furnace, and he declared, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God." Whoops! All of a sudden now, now reality is starting to hit Nebuchadnezzar. Instead of just calling him by name, he understands that there's he might have stepped in it. So, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, that's El Elyon, Most High God, come out, come here. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire. And the satraps, the prefects, the governors, and the king's counselors gathered together and saw that the fire had not had any power over the bodies of these men. The hair of their heads was not singed, their cloaks were not harmed, and no smell of fire came upon them. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him, and set aside the king's command, and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except their own God." Nebuchadnezzar was unstable. And I think you're starting to see that. Nebuchadnezzar was unstable. And yet God chose him. Remember, he is ruling because God gave him dominion over this kingdom. Not only over this kingdom, but the animals of the kingdom and the surrounding kingdoms. God called Nebuchadnezzar my servant. So God chose him for a reason. He's just not an everyday king, just one of these kings that are in the king of Moab and all these kingdoms that are around here. There's something about him that God is using here. And you see by his occasional glimpses, occasionally Nebuchadnezzar sees the truth. Because he see right here, he set aside the king's command, my command, and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except their own. You do not see that kind of loyalty in a Babylonian, in a Chaldean, in any of these gods, because they'll change their gods really quick. They'll change their god really quick because they're looking to be on the winning team. But these guys would not. And this is not the first time that they've done this, defied the king because their God said no. So this, and Nebuchadnezzar sees this. He sees this. Therefore, he continues, verse 29, therefore make a decree any people, nation, or language that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses laid in ruin. For there is no other God who is able to rescue in this way. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. So Nebuchadnezzar saw the, the loyalty, the power that the Most High God had, and his servants, the followers of the Most High God, had towards the Most High God, and Nebuchadnezzar's people did not have that. Nebuchadnezzar saw that. He saw that. And that is why God chose him to be his servant and to have dominion, to rule as this golden kingdom. Remember, Babylon is the golden head, not divided. It's the only piece of the statue that's not divided. The head, the shoulders and arms, 2 arms, the belly and thighs, 2 thighs, and then the legs and feet, 2 of those. It's the only part of this statue that is not divided. God chose Nebuchadnezzar to lead that because there was something about him that was different than the other kings in this part of the world. And it's important for us to remember that, because Nebuchadnezzar is just not one of these other Alexander the Great or Herod Agrippa or any of these other. They're just one after the other. Nebuchadnezzar was something special. Something special. We also see that just like Saul was something special. God chose Saul for a reason. But Saul kind of lost his head. Well, Nebuchadnezzar's going to lose his here right in a minute. Right in a minute. But never let that get out of your mind, that Nebuchadnezzar was chosen specifically by God to have dominion over this kingdom of Babylon and whatever nations they conquered for a reason. And we see it all through just these first 3 chapters. We see glimpses of Nebuchadnezzar being able to see God, the Most High God, and how different he is from the other gods. But just like Pharaoh in Egypt, he never got to that last step. He just didn't get to that last step. So, thus ends chapter 3. Chapter 4 is very different because chapter 4 is written by Nebuchadnezzar. It might not have been written by his hand, but this is Nebuchadnezzar's voice that we're going to read in chapter 4. We don't see this in the Bible very much. This is not a prophet speaking here. This is the king himself. King Nebuchadnezzar to all peoples and languages that dwell on the earth. This is Nebuchadnezzar's words here. So going into chapter 4, remember, this is Nebuchadnezzar's voice that we're hearing. So bear that in mind as we go into chapter 4. Any questions on chapter 3? Questions on chapter 3? We're right at the end of the time here. Any questions? Chapter 3 is very important because we see Nebuchadnezzar catching a glimpse of God's majesty. But it doesn't last long. Any other questions? All right then. I hear thunder behind me. You guys out west have already, it's already passed over you, but we've still got some thunder coming up. So
Hope it's not too bad for
yeah,
you.
I hope it didn't hit you guys out west very hard. But
No,
yeah, we
not
got a big
really.
old storm coming up. But everybody, keep your head down, roll your windows up, and watch out. And we will get back together next Thursday.
Okay,
Well,
good
thank
class.
you.
Good
Take care.
question. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye bye.
Everybody.